Welcome everybody to the Kennedy DE&I webinar. Strength lies in differences, not in similarities. And with this, I would like to welcome you all to our webinar on DE&I from a very global perspective, and I mean truly global. We are the organizers. We are from Kennedy Executive Search and Consulting. We are a network of boutique firms providing services on global scale to our clients on recruitment, talent management, coaching, and also supporting our clients on how to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Kennedy DE&I team, we are here today in the audience. I have Verle here next to me as well, but I would like to welcome Verle is from Belgium, Federico is from Argentina, John is from Chicago, the US, Alvaro is from Spain, Lars is from Sweden, Marimar is from Mexico, Marcus is from Austria, and myself, Swedish, based in Monaco. So this is our Kennedy team. We are very global, as you can see, and it's with great pleasure that I welcome you all to our webinar. We're going to kick off with introductions of the panelists, and then we will have roundtable discussions, followed by Q&A. So any questions from the audience will be a great time to ask the panel then. So if I start with quick introductions, I think I will go this way and start with the John at the very on my left, actually. Would you like to introduce yourself first, and then followed by Mariana, Dean, and Leslie?
Thank you so much. My name is John Samuel, and I am the co-founder and CEO of Abler, which is a disability inclusion and accessibility organization. This passion of mine for disability inclusion really stems from the fact that I am blind myself, but that wasn't always the case. But as I came to embrace my disability, I realized that I can make an impact and remove barriers for other people. And that's what I'm doing today. So thank you so much.
Thank you, John. Mariana?
Hello, everyone. My name is Mariana Politopoulou. I'm Greek. I'm based in Athens at the moment. I have a long professional career abroad and in Greece, mostly in CEO and senior executive roles. I'm very passionate about D&I and also about making sure that we get diverse teams on board. I realized throughout my career that I did it without really knowing the theory. I found many great things about it, and I would like to be an advocate of this practice. And I have experienced a lot of D&I in my life because I'm a mother of 3 young men who are all adults now. And this on its own is a big task, I can tell you.
Thank you. If I move then to my right, Dean.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dean Ricker. I'm president of Skolnick Industries here in Chicago, Illinois. We're a manufacturer of steel drums and industrial packaging. It's used for everything from pharmaceuticals to food to nuclear material. We're also a LGBT certified owned business.
Thank you. And last but definitely not least, we have Leslie on our panel.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I'm Leslie. I'm English. I'm from London originally, but I'm married to a Dutchman. I'm now based here in the Netherlands, and I am the Global Talent and Leadership Manager and also leading the DE&I initiative within Friesland Campina, which is one of the world's largest dairy companies. We're a cooperative, so we're actually owned by over 16,000 farmers across mainly the Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany. And I've been in this role for about 4 years, but I've got over 30 plus years of commercial experience. So a bit like Mariana, I kind of came into this topic through what I like to call a wibbly wobbly path, and very much embraced it through all the different cultures and people that I've worked with over the years, and just been very grateful, I think, that I've had the chance to put that passion now into the role that I do. So lovely to be with you all today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we have a very interesting, very diverse, and very rich in experience panel that we're very proud as a Kennedy team to present to you today. diversity, equity, and inclusion are priorities for most organizations today, while well-informed leaders of organizations understand the strategic importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but realizing those goals is challenging. So if I turn to you, Mariana, for our first question. So in your opinion, what are you looking at when defining an organization's level of maturity of DE&I?
Well, assuming that I don't have a lot of information about the organization, I just look at it from the outside, I would look at very basic things such as like the organizational chart or the management team. I think these evidently show what is the mentality of the organization. So if, for example, we see a diverse management team in terms of not only sex, but also in terms of age or education or nationality, that would automatically give us a hint that it could be diverse. And but the management team and the organizational chart, the more hierarchical an organization is, to my experience, the less diverse and democratic. So these are the things. Now, if I could have meetings with the people, or if I could have a view about their culture, I think one thing that would show me how diverse it is what kind of culture they have in terms of meetings. For example, if people have only one-to-ones, the senior management, then this is not so much engaging. If they have more meetings with more people involved for decisions, then it could be a positive side of diversity being part of the decision making. This is according to my experience.
Yeah, thank you. So with your, if I turn to you then, Dean, with your leadership, your organization has been, let's say, an early adapter of DE&I. So what were the main challenges, internal, externally, of implementing DE&I in your organization?
Yeah, for us, it was really a homespun effort. And before we realized what DE&I even was, our journey started off, we were doing business with a really big pharmaceutical company, and we had to fill out the new supplier form. And we got to the part, are you a woman-owned business, a minority-owned business? And there was something on there for, are you an LGBTE, which stood for, gay and lesbians, LGBT enterprise-owned business. And we said yes, only to find out that you couldn't just say yes, you had to become certified. And we found out that there was a National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, and they do the certification process. So we went through that. And then for us, it really went from there that, we had always been an open and inclusive organization, but from there, it was really about how do we formalize the process, realizing that this is not just an HR function, but it's a function that has to be, everybody has responsibility, for DE&I, not just the HR folks. Establishing metrics, really, growing up, right? And realizing the importance and the value of it. But also as the president, really understanding that I have to be the biggest champion, the biggest cheerleader, and that, this isn't just, it's about constantly educating and talking about this with our employees, but also with our suppliers and with our customers. So there's definitely an inward focus, but definitely we want to make sure this is outward too. Because that goes to, I think, really creating a more holistic approach to DE&I.
Yeah, absolutely. What were the main, let's say obstacles? Did you have any challenges in this journey?
I think at first there was some fear, right? And it just, to personalize it, sometimes you're afraid to come out of the closet because you're afraid how people are going to react. You're afraid you might lose your friends and your family. And there was a little bit of that, oh my gosh, we can't tell our customers what happens if they don't like us, right? What happens if they don't like us, they no longer want to buy from us. And you just have to take that leap of faith. And guess what we found out? We didn't lose anybody. Mm-hmm. And actually, what did we do? We gained allies and we gained support and we strengthened our relationships. So I think that was one big thing. And then again, just back to what I said earlier, just also making it clear to everybody that wasn't just an HR function, but that everybody had to take responsibility.
Yeah, it kind of drizzles down through the organization, and
Right.
it needs to lie on many people's shoulders.
That's right.
Yeah, thank you. So if I turn to you then, Leslie, what challenges have you had in your organization with either implementing or driving diversity and inclusion strategies?
Well, I was really smiling when Dean was talking about, I think, particularly two things. Firstly, about it's not just an HR activity. And when you talked about fear, because that was, I think, one of the things that really struck me when I was thinking about what are our biggest challenges, but maybe from a slightly different angle. Because I don't think anybody is going to argue against this. Everybody intuitively knows it's the right thing to do. But the number of times I have heard people say, what if I get it wrong? What if I make it worse? What if I just say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing? And you can just see it kind of paralyzes the organization. And so therefore it's so easy just to default it back to HR. Well, it's a people thing, so it should be an HR process or an HR responsibility. So I think the biggest challenges for us were getting the organization to understand this is not an HR responsibility. It is the responsibility of every single person in the organization. And you don't have to be a leader to pick this up. You can start by role modeling it every single day yourself and by holding others accountable. And we know people are busy, and we know the world is terribly dynamic and there's a lot to deal with. But just the small things that everybody does every day can make a big difference. And I think that shift in mindset, that's the thing that makes it successful, but that's the biggest thing to change. Mindset and getting people over that hurdle of what if I get it wrong? Just try. People appreciate effort. People appreciate you reaching out. But yeah, fear is a big hurdle for many people. I think that's our biggest challenge.
And how would you say what is the level of maturity then within your organization? How would you assess that?
People often ask me, are we a thought leader? Are we at the cutting edge of DE&I? And I think the honest answer to that is no, we're not. We are a very honest and authentic organization, and we have a great heart. So we're definitely not embryonic in this. We're definitely not in the early stages, and we're learning very much as we are doing. But we're very honest about the fact that we still have a way to go. And this is probably a never-ending journey. So we're a bit in that middle ground. There are certain things that I think we're doing extremely well. And there are other areas where we've still got a lot to learn. And that's okay. And I think when we're honest to all of ourselves about this, then that's how we learn. And that's how we also shift that mindset, keeping the openness to want to grow. So sounds we're a little bit we're on the journey in some respects, and we've got a long way to go in others.
Well, everything starts with awareness, right? So once there is awareness established, it's easier to make steps from there.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Leslie. So turning to you, John, your story and your journey is incredibly inspiring. We have just heard a little bit of it. The rest of us panelists knows more about you, but tell us a little bit about your journey and the successes you've had in bringing Abler 360 together.
No, I appreciate that. My journey really starts growing up in North Carolina, where in the United States, where I noticed changes in my eyesight, but I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was actually wrong with my eyes. I thought maybe I'm just not getting the schoolwork. Maybe I'm not that great of an athlete. But when I went to college and I was diagnosed with this degenerating eye condition and was told I was going blind, I just didn't know how to handle it. My actions led to me failing out of college. But it really, I think the fear that I had was that I had never been exposed to anyone with a disability, or at least I didn't know that. I didn't realize that majority of disabilities are invisible. Mm-hmm. And so as a result, I tried to keep it a secret for as long as I could. And that led to me traveling around the globe for my career, in stints in India, New York, Africa, and DC, all while keeping it all a secret and keeping it just that weight on my shoulders that really not only was causing me just physical pain, but mental anguish as well. And it took me meeting another blind person to really change that mindset. And that proximity to this individual built this new level of empathy that I never had before. I could only finally love my whole self because I learned that there's other people like myself. And as a result, I realized there was all these barriers I had to change if I wanted to help other people. And when I joined the organization called LCI, which happens to be the largest employer of people who are blind in the United States, they were a manufacturing company, but they wanted to create upward mobility for people in tech. And at the time, when I was looking at jobs, all the jobs had tech. And I just couldn't imagine how could somebody with a disability do that type of job. And so when I did, had this task to start a new business to address that issue, I realized in my own life that there was several things I had to address. One was the digital accessibility. That meant eliminating the digital divide. There were so many times I just couldn't even apply for a job online because the application just wasn't accessible for me with low vision at the time. And then as somebody who's blind using assistive technology. So I realized we had to address that barrier. The second thing we had to do was we had to change the mindsets of people in organizations. Now I had to go through that whole journey to finally love myself and embrace my disability. But other people who haven't had to go through that journey, they didn't understand. They focus on what people with disabilities couldn't do. And we had to change that mindset. The third thing we had to do was we had to create pathways for employment. I knew that I had the love and support of family and friends who helped me navigate my education, going through my undergrad and my graduate school, but not everybody had that kind of career path. And so I realized we had to create pathways for individuals. And so as we started to go through this, it was my own lived experiences that enabled us to be able to, understand the needs of people with disabilities and create those things that can remove those barriers. And essentially, we're living the mantra of the disability community. That is, nothing about us without us. And so my team is made up of 70% of people with disability, because who better to address those issues than people who live it?
Thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to come back to you, John, in a few minutes, but Leslie, if I turn to you again, then, so what would you say would be the biggest business impact on your industry of successfully implementing DE&I? What would change and what would happen?
I think it's not so much about my industry, as in the dairy industry per se. I think the impact the DE&I brings is probably going to be bringing similar benefits to most industries. And I think there's three things that I'd probably want to share. So the first one, I think, is we all have probably gone through those experiences of if you put a similar group of people in the room, you get a very efficient discussion, but you probably recognize it because it's going to be very similar to things that you've heard before. When you put a very diverse group in a room, you get a very interesting discussion. You get a lot of different perspectives. You probably get some arguments, some disagreements, but the end result is a lot more creative. And I think when you scale that up in an organization, that's exactly what it delivers. It just brings that fresh perspective. And it's difficult sometimes for teams and organizations to embrace that, to feel comfortable with, let's call it, that chaos. But the end result is always worth it, bringing in that fresh perspective. So I think in the, we call the VUCA world, the volatility, the dynamic that we live in, if we really want to stay relevant as organizations, we need it. We have to be more creative, we have to be faster, we have to be more innovative. And that's only going to come with different perspectives. So I think it's a lot of it about staying relevant and staying up to date for the way the world is evolving. I think the second aspect to it, which I see a lot, is work-life balance. So when you bring that diversity into the organization, and I think particularly I've seen it a lot after COVID, people are saying this is what a lot of women bring to the table, we want more balance, we want more well-being, we want more understanding around the challenges of having a family. It isn't all about the work situation. So I think, again, this difference of opinion makes it easier for people to speak up about what is important for them in their lives, which was, I think, less able to do so before we really were tackling this topic. So I think there's a work-life balance aspect, or just having a different conversation at the office environment. And lastly, I think it's about just the kind of talent you bring in and you keep within your organization. So these days, it's not just about the Gen Zs, it's about everybody and how you look at an organization. And I think, Mariana, you were talking about when you look at an org chart, you draw a conclusion about an organization, don't you? Rightly or wrongly, it gives an impression of how that organization is and what it is like to work in that organization. And therefore, that diversity, whether it's about what you see visually in its org structures or the culture that you experience, that is what attracts people to an organization, and it's what keeps people in an organization. So those are, for me, the three, I would say, biggest impacts that I think, as I say, not just for the dairy industry, I think those are probably applicable for most industries.
Yeah, thank you. I agree. Dean, you were talking before about gaining allies, receiving understanding, receiving positive reinforcements from suppliers and customers. And your industry is obviously very different from the dairy industry. But what do you think would be the biggest impact from, let's say, maybe more from a general perspective then in your industry on, let's say, successfully implementing DE&I across?
Two things immediately come to mind. Number one is attracting world-class employees, and number two is opening doors with new customers. And I want to talk first about attracting world-class employees. There are a lot of companies out there who don't believe in doing what we're talking about. And there's a lot of employees who work there who are really good and really smart, but they cannot be themselves. They're not happy. And I think by putting out there, when we're looking for new employees, and in the interviewing process, letting employees know that, who we are, that when they come to work for us, they can be who they are, they're going to be supported, right? We're open and we're inclusive. And I think by doing that, you're going to attract some really great talent to your organization. And I think we've been really successful at that. And I'm also a big believer that in order to make the best business decisions, I think having a really diverse background of people, you end up making the best decisions for your business, right? It's not myopic, and you've got just these really broad perspectives that people bring because of their diverse backgrounds. And I think, in terms of going toe-to-toe with our competition, I think we're a better company because of what we do and how we do it. Secondly, in talking about, with our customers, again, there's a lot of companies out there that are looking to do business with a diverse supplier base. And again, by letting folks know who we are, it's opened doors for us because they want to do business with people that reflect their customer base and their employee base. So, we've realized both benefits internally and externally.
Yeah, mirroring your customers internally, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yeah, very powerful. And we see with our clients that there are groups that they are not reaching because they're not able to communicate well with them. They don't maybe really understand them. So mirroring internally can also help to supply better products or services to all of your clients. Mariana, if I turn to, well, I'm going to turn this way. So from your experience, how would you say from an employee perspective, when senior management is committed, obviously we can understand that that's positive, but what in your experience or in your opinion, what do you think changes, or what impact does it have on an employee base?
Thank you for the question. Actually, I think Leslie has answered it very well. I would add to what she said. I think people trust you when they see that you are really supporting DE&I. And I think that they sense that you really care. You care because if you allow for this diversity and you care for equity and you're inclusive, then they know that they can be themselves as well. I think this is the way for them to feel that they have this freedom of speech. You know, in the past, in my experience, when I worked abroad, that was much easier because the environment was anyway international. But in companies that I've worked for in Greece, either multinationals or Greek banks or Greek large companies, this is not a given. So in the past, especially because I have the privilege of being a CEO for decades. So in the past, when I was like 20 years ago or 15 years ago, there wasn't so much freedom of speech of the people below the management team. And even the CEO had a very sort of hierarchical and even dictator-like approach. So by changing to more inclusive, caring, and diverse, people realize that the company cares, that they can trust the management, and that they can speak up freely about their opinion. And sometimes these opinions are so useful because they know so well what should be done. They can be more creative. And of course, you can attract talent, as also Dean said. You can retain the talent, and the talent is engaged. This is my experience.
Yeah, thank you. I completely agree. So if I turn to you, John, business leaders who don't maybe have the same level of experience or level of understanding or awareness, and those companies, they don't have the same level, the same maturity of D&I as you do. So what do you think as let's say as a business leader, what can they do on a daily basis to try and let's say, increase it and be more engaged and more aware in the topic of D&I?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the first thing is being intentional, going in, be open and minded about, changing your perception, because you have to start getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And so when you're intentional about that, that's the first step. But additionally, I think a lot of times we can get caught up with the analysis. Like you think about the big picture, you're like, oh, we have to do all these things that you don't do anything at all. So it goes down to action. We've got to go from awareness to action. And I think that's the most important thing. And that can be as small as having a conversation with your team members to get to know them, to understand their identities, not just from what you can see, but to understanding the individuals, understand the challenges they may be going through, understand their, them on a more personal level. I think, when we talk about DEI, it's much more than just words and a policy, but it's about people. And when you start to realize that everything we're doing about diversity, equity, inclusion is about people, we focus on the people first. And I think that is as simple as it can get. And that's how you can at least start taking action, which is the first step.
Yeah, thank you. We have mentioned a little bit about resistance or how to overcome that, awareness, obviously, increasing that level. If I turn to you, Leslie, from a KPI, so management KPI perspective, do you think this is, let's say, what are your experience, and do you think this is a good way to increase or enhance or focus leaders, let's say, in the right direction when it comes to D&I?
I'm smiling because I think this is the never-ending discussion, is it not? And I see my colleagues smiling as well. And there's so many mixed views on this. I think if you look at those companies that have made progress, they are the ones that have set KPIs. They've tracked them. They've been very public about them. But it's more than just the KPI. I mean, a KPI is just a number. The thing that sits behind it, and this is what John was saying as well, we're still talking about people here. So the KPI is important because it makes it very clear to the organization and its employees, this is important. And this is what we are going to progress towards. So it's that dot on the horizon. People always like a little bit of perspective. But it means nothing without the why behind it. So if it is not backed up by the value of why we are doing this, why we've set the KPI, why this particular KPI, and to constantly relook at that KPI. Don't just look at it as a single dot on the horizon, but continuously sense check it. Does it make sense? Is it relevant for where the business is today and where the business wants to be in the future? The KPI itself means nothing. So yes, as Friesen Campina, we have KPIs and we do consider them important, but they're just, I would say, one tiny part of the whole picture. And that story behind it, the constant reevaluation of the KPI itself, that is really the critical aspect. Otherwise, it's simply a number. And the employees see through it. People see through it. So we constantly have the conversation around it, challenge each other, and really reach out into the organization to sense check that people understand why we chose that number and what it means for us. And that conversation is actually the more important part, not the number itself.
Yeah. What about you, Dean, from your organization? Have you set KPIs, such KPIs on your management team, on your leaders, from a DE&I perspective? Oh, I think you are mute. Yes, you are.
Sorry, my dog was barking earlier and I keep having to hit the mute button. He's not cooperating with me today. Yes, so goals and metrics was something that came a little bit later in our process, but we've started tracking, demographics across the organization, retention rates and turnover, pay equity, advancement. And another thing that I think is really important is that we really start to train up our employees, right? So everybody's got a good shot at moving up in the organization, because not everybody comes to the table with the same advantages and backgrounds and education levels. So we're tracking that too.
Yeah.
And something that was mentioned earlier, it's definitely a work in progress for us, and something that we're working on continually.
Yeah, thank you. If I turn to you, John, from a KPI perspective, the clients that you work with, do they have they set certain types of KPIs, or what is your recommendation for organizations to try and implement it better, or increase the awareness?
Yeah, so with our clients, organizations that are looking to be more accessible, there's a couple of key drivers. The ones that are kind of earlier in their maturity model, they're really driven by compliance. The compliance driven ones, they're like, oh, we have to do it because we need to check this box off. So as you move on that maturity model, the KPIs start to change from not just being compliant to being, more inclusive, but they start to shift over towards the business case. And again, that's good, whether it is, attracting new clients, whether it is attracting, new talent, either way, you're now shifting in that maturity model from compliance to business case. And then the most mature ones are just saying, we just want to do the right thing. And so it goes from least altruistic to most altruistic. And they want to be more inclusive because it's the right thing to do. There is a business case for it. And if they do it those ways, they're also going to be compliant. So we do see that. We see organizations whose KPIs are initially driven by just checking that box, to then, seeing the benefits of it, not only from, new business, but also just seeing, happier employers, more open employees, and people who just want to bring their full self to the workplace. So it's really exciting when you get to see a client who gets it, wants it, and has the capacity to do something about it. And as a vendor to these organizations, there's nothing that makes me more happy.
Yeah. So, and you see a difference in how they, let's say, approach, whether they have a high level of awareness versus a low level of awareness or commitment. Yes,
you can see those aha moments also, because they may come into the meeting, or they may come to the table, saying that, oh, we're forced to do this, or this is something we legally want to do. But as you get to see it, and again, something I often talk a lot about is proximity builds empathy. And the more that they get to spend time with you, and then they see it, they get into it, they get more excited about it, and it's contagious. And it's that interaction that you have with one another it's great. And then, you know, when they go back and they get so excited when they share it with their colleagues, and it really does spread, and it's quite beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. That's I think it also comes back to what we are unaware of, what we are unaware of, right? So
that's correct. You
we've
don't know what you don't know. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that the big question of course is, how do we ensure that this is sustainable, that this is just not ad hoc activities that we try to do, that we are doing a lot of discussions and trainings, etc. But how does it become apparent? How does it become permanent in an organization? And actually, as Leslie mentioned, it's about change, it's about culture. So this is, let's say, an open question to all of you. How do we ensure that DE&I is there for the long run and not just let's say ad hoc activities? Maybe I'll start with you, Mariana. What are your thoughts on to make it sustainable?
I have a very basic way of thinking towards that. So I think it may sound very baby-like, but it's like, just do it and mean it. So it's not what we say, it's what we do. So we just need to continue and actually role modeling it. So each one of us, I don't know how much we can influence the teams, but if we are the ones continuing to do it and really being authentic, then others will follow. It may take time, but that requires a stamina of us continuing to believe in it and behaving as such.
Yeah, if I turn to you, Dean, how would you ensure that it's sustainable, or what would your recommendations be?
Well, I'll tell you right now. Right now, I think it's all about leadership and having some serious spine and being vocal about it. Here in the United States, DEI is we're getting a lot of serious pushback politically. Today, on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, there's an article, and it says companies seek to avert backlash, avoid talk of social and green issues. And it reported that 31% of companies in recent earning calls, 31% avoided mention of their green programs, social programs, and DEI activities. And, you know, we've got now legislators in certain states here in the United States who are actually passing laws banning DEI activities at universities. So, you know, I think this is certainly ill-advised. It's scary, but it's going to require people like everybody on this panel discussion and leaders and presidents of companies to stand up and push back and you know, and take lessons from other movements. And we understand the value of DEI programs. And one of the things that was encouraging about this article said, even though there was less mention of activities, nobody's pulling back on what they're doing internally. So that they understand the value. But I think it's important that as leaders, we keep talking about it, and we're not going to go back, you know, in the proverbial DEI closet. We've got to be vocal and supportive of it. And doing things like this is really important right now.
What about you, Leslie? what are your thoughts?
Well, I was very triggered by what Dean was saying, because I think how do you push? And a lot, I think, depends very much on the culture of the organization. So going back a bit to also what we were saying around KPIs. So as Freezing Community, if we look at the culture, what we know works best within our organization is really embedding this in a way that people can relate to. So it's almost breaking it down into small pieces, like Marianne was saying, just do it. But to be very clear to people what just do it means, and to break it into things that people can very easily do every single day. So one of the things we've built into our training programs now, whether that's something specifically on DE&I, or whether it's into our leadership programs, or whether it's just into general conversations we have as part of town halls or stand-ups, small things that everybody can relate to. And it's that relatability that makes people go, I can do that. Wow. So that's what you mean by DE&I. Oh, I thought you meant there's going to be some like big, massive program and it was going to be some like major change. And you're like, no, this is just about treating people nice every day. And then it sort of lands. And there are times when you do need to push and you do need to be maybe even a little provocative. But most of the time, it's just making it small, manageable, relevant pieces that nobody could ever say no to. And then gradually over time, people look back on their behavior and they see the change. But it's been so small and incremental that it didn't feel like something people had to rebel against. And that takes time, and I know for some people and some companies, they want to go faster and perhaps more dramatic, but that's what works for us. And that's what has proved quite successful, I think, for us over the last 2 to 3 years. But I think everybody has to find their own path. So that's the Fries and Campina way. May not necessarily work for everybody else, though.
Yeah, no, of course, you're all different and have different the different teams, different backgrounds, different not I wouldn't say abilities, but different viewpoints. And of course,
it's culture. I think it's the culture of the organization is very important, and understanding what works in your organization may not necessarily work in someone else's is important. So looking back a bit as how did we implement that change or that mindset shift? And would that work again? And that I think has been very important. What works for you? And as I say, it's not one size fits all, but that's the beauty of DE&I, is it not?
Absolutely, yes. I think it's the core of it, actually. If I turn to you, John, what do you see, let's say, from to ensure it's a sustainable, let's say, progress, either from your own perspective or from the clients that you work with? What do you think is important?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with Leslie, because we've talked about this, that DEI is a journey, and this is a long journey, and it's going to continue. But that can be daunting for some folks. But the key thing is going back to what Leslie talked about, breaking it down into small things and building it in so that it is sustainable, that it is harder to unwind, as Dean was talking about, how people are, we don't want people to take that step back. We don't go and unwind it. But when you integrate it into and build it in from the foundation of your processes, policies, everything that you do, it then just becomes, again, ingrained into the culture, that it's not just, one or thing or two things. It is part of everything you do. It's everything from your, whether even just be as simple as your job description, incorporating in there, whether it be, your onboarding policy, right, processes, or whether it be your customer, policies, everything. You just have to build it into it so that it's going to be much more difficult to ever unwind, because, I think there's a lot of fear that if there is a business case, companies are going through recession or anything, they don't want DEI to be taken out. But if you have it built in and ingrained into it, you can't do it. And it's just part of it. And you realize that DEI just doesn't help a few people, but it benefits all people. And that's, that's something you can't undo.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that ingrained in, because it's you plant seeds almost, and that is a trees and forest that starts growing, which is rooted, let's say, there, and it can't be moved and shoveled away. We have let's say come to the end of the questions that we had that we as a Kennedy team had. So I open the floor to the audience. Any questions that you may have to our beautiful panel, please let us know. You can type it in the chat box. I am sure that we have questions from some of the Kennedy members. I can also see a lot of our colleagues, Ireland, US, Argentina, here in the audience. So if you also have questions, please type it in.
If I just may, while people are just popping a few questions in chat, I was triggered by something John was saying, because we often think it has to be really major initiatives to create the change. And I just wanted to give one example of something small that we've done. And I was amazed at the impact. So in my email signature, I put, my working hours may be different to yours. Feel free to respond when you're back working. And something else we've done as well, because I was prompted with John, that you were saying about the recruitment text, just a couple of lines talking about, you know, we welcome applications from everybody, even if you don't feel you might be fully qualified for the role. I am amazed how many people respond to these small things. It's incredible. People that write say, oh, you know, and they'll be on a very serious business topic, and then they'll finish the email going, oh, by the way, I love this line that you've got on your signature. I'm going to use it too. So I think let's not ever underestimate the impact of these little small things and how much they resonate with people. So just wanted to share with that while people might be thinking of a few questions.
Yeah, Verla, do you have a
There's one question from Bob Hoffman from our colleague in Ireland. So Bob is asking, so there's a lot of, we have been talking about gender, sexuality, abilities, ethnicity, and age. And what about exactly the age issue? It seems to be the poor cousin in this group. So what is perhaps your opinion about age or your experiences? Leslie.
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I can understand why it gets called the poor cousin. And it's something we've actually more recently started addressing. And the way we address it is that we talk a lot about generational differences. And we're building that more and more into a lot of the programs that we do. So we do it when we talk about maybe learning styles, or what are the expectations of an organization, or just thinking about maybe the language even that we use in our recruitment text. What might appeal to a Gen Z versus a millennial, for example. So we're not wanting to look at it really explicitly. We don't set targets behind it, but we are really diving into understanding what are the different needs, expectations, behaviors across the different generations. Because we know for the first time there are 5 different generations in the workforce. And there was a quite interesting study. I'll be honest, I can't remember which one it did it, but so I'm not going to try and quote it because I'll probably guess it wrong. But it said that basically less than 10% of leaders feel well equipped to deal with those 5 different generations. So if you're a leader, you've probably got a lot of different generations in your teams, and trying to relate to them and their needs. Many leaders, well, 90%, do not feel well equipped to deal with that. So that's something we're looking to address, as I say, through different leadership programs, but also different initiatives. So yeah, that's how we're looking at it. And I just see there's another one in the question in the chat. I'll write the my email signature. I'll just pop that into the chat now.
Thank you, Leslie. There is another question from Rose Leonard. The latest issue of HR magazine mentioned a few alarming statistics that the CDO roles have been posted at a lower rate than other C-suite roles recently. And DE&I functions are being disproportionately affected by layoffs and budget cuts. This speaks to the crucial need to align DE&I to the business strategy of an organization and ensure that DE&I leaders align with the senior leaders so they get it deeply. Does the panel have any effective ways to deeply engage senior executives? Caroline, can we perhaps ask Rose? Can you give her the word and give her the floor and ask what?
Absolutely.
Just,
I think It's does the panel have any effective ways to deeply engage senior executives? Let's see here. Rose, would you like to just ask your question maybe to the panel?
Yes, absolutely. Can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, we can.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Yes, I think this has been touched on by a number of the panelists here today that, you know, it's a both and. It's working at that micro level. I think Leslie was talking about the need to have it feel very real at a day-to-day interactive behavioral basis amongst colleagues and leaders. But I'm a DEI professional. I've been in the field over 15 years and former chief diversity officer of a large financial services company in New York. And, you know, part of the struggle was the both and, always keeping an eye as a senior leader at both what's happening amongst the employees and building inclusiveness and a sense of engagement and loyalty and how that affects the business line, but never losing sight of the executive team saying, well, what does it look like for them, and making it feel very relevant so that the DEI strategy was not this nice thing to do off the side. It makes people feel happy and very engaged in an inclusive organization, but that it impacts the bottom line. And it's important to leaders to really get that. So I was very alarmed by that statistic in the magazine that I was reading this morning over a cup of tea, saying, wow, like, why is that happening? So there was a bit of a performative phase after the George Floyd murders. And I think Dean could relate to, you know, the United States, we saw a lot of activity and CEOs getting up to that lectern saying, we are doubling down our efforts on DEI. Well, fast forward a few years, and I think the Journal may have even done an article on this, budgets are being cut. And a lot of the promises that were made by leaders, no one really followed up that, in fact, those commitments were actualized. So I'm always very interested. How do you connect to the senior leadership team so that it's absolutely a non-negotiable, that a senior leader wouldn't dream of cutting ahead of diversity or a diversity team or a diversity budget. So I'm just curious if anyone has, you know, any sort of tried and true tactics that work with the leadership team, because there's the scorecard piece, right? There's ways to bring them into the dialogue and make them feel engaged, but any tactics or sort of strategies that the panelists have found to be really effective in making those leaders feel this is a non-negotiable. I wouldn't dare cut because they're so important to our business and our strategy, our business strategy.
Thank you.
Well, I can talk about that. This is John Samuel from you know, the way that we talk about it, in particular around accessibility as part of the, you know, DEI. And when we talk about it, you know, the disability community is 1 billion people worldwide. That's with a B. That's a large number of people. That's the largest minority group. And so going back to what you were talking about in terms of with the senior leadership team, explaining to them the size of this market, what they're missing out on. And so there was a recent report done by Accenture around organizations that were disability inclusion champions of the Fortune 500 companies. The 26% of them, 26% of the champions had 26% higher revenue, 30% higher profit margin, and 2 times the net income. And so when you start to show these type of financial gains for an executive saying, look, if we're not being disability inclusion champions, we're missing out. And at the end of the day, if you're tied, if that's what you're really driven by is those financial returns or those kind of the business case for it, we share that, we provide that. But, you know, at the same time, we share how, you know, the disability community, it's beyond just individuals who are with disabilities. The disability the community includes those friends and family, you know, caregivers. And when you add up all of those people, it becomes almost 1 in 2 people in the world is tied to the disability community. And if you're thinking about it from that perspective, you're really missing out if you're not thinking about this. And it's something that you can't, you know, because we're all looking for new clients, we're all looking for new talent. And if you're excluding this group of people, you're missing the boat.
Yes, you're actually connecting it from you're hooking them with a business angle that leads them to a more value angle, let's say, right? So
that's correct. You're going from that to the value. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Thank you. Dean or Mariana, do you have comments to Rose's question?
Yeah, I come at that from two perspectives. Number one, we're a small business, so actually when she posted what was it, DOI, I had to look it up. Because I guess, you know, director of diversity and inclusion for us is, you know, it falls to me and it falls to, you know, everyone on our team. But coming at it from a small business who's a member of like NGLCC, I think it's about, you know, leveraging our membership in organizations like that. So whether you're in, you know, a woman-owned business organization, you know, veterans organizations, you know, and putting, you know, and making sure that we're having the conversations with those bigger companies, you know, and back to what John said, and reminding them of the value of, you know, of DEI and not doing away with those people in their organizations, and why that's important, and ultimately, you know, why it brings value to their bottom lines. Because I think the statistics and the data bear it out why it's important.
Thank you. Mariana, did you have some comment?
I think that everyone else has described so well. I cannot add anything. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we are respectful of time. This is, I know that, well, for us, we are end of the day, so this is not so bad for us, but for many of you in the US, you have a full day ahead. So the last minute we have left, I'd like, if everybody, let's say a last famous word, or, you know, how would you wrap up this webinar with a word or a small sentence? I start with you, Leslie.
Well, I don't want to steal Mariana's line, but just do it.
Yes, it's a good one.
You know, just get started. Do one thing tomorrow and encourage somebody else to do one thing as well, and you're on the journey.
Dean?
Yep, make it a daily practice every day.
Daily practice, yeah, very good. Mariana?
I would add care. Just, you know, if you care, you will find these little things that the other panelists explained, that you can make it happen.
Thank you. And John?
It's about people. It's a focus on people.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a very good wrap up of our webinar. I would like to thank you all so much for participating. The panel, it's been really good to have your expertise, your experience, your perspectives, and thank you so much for the audience that dialed in. Kennedy team, Kennedy DE&I team, it's a great pleasure to work with you all. And thank you so much. This has been a recorded session, so I'll share it with you. Some of you had bad connections and like to review it, then this will fully be possible. Thank you so much. Have a nice afternoon, nice day, and a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Very good.
Thank you so much.